Coordinating Council. This is the Regional Coordinating Council for June 3rd, 2025. And I'm going to let Colleen Samuels take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrea, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to DRMAC's June Regional Coordinating Council meeting. Today, we're excited to host a panel discussion on private paid transportation and their role in coordination. We have an amazing panel lined up, but first, Latoya will kick us off with a mission reminder and some quick Zoom tips.
Thanks, Colleen. For all of our new attendees, a warm welcome. We would like to start each meeting by sharing our mission. As it's the core principle guiding everything we do, DRMAC's mission is to take a multi-level approach to information and empower people to overcome mobility barriers through education, collaboration, and advocacy, ultimately enhancing their quality of life. If you haven't yet, please type your name and organization into the chat. We kindly request that everyone remain muted unless speaking, but feel free to use the chat for questions or comments. You can also raise your virtual hand by using the reaction button to contribute. Now, let's go ahead and move on to brief staff introductions and update from DRMAC team, which I'll start with me. I'm Latoya Paranti. I'm the development manager, if you guys haven't known me yet. And my update is that we are finally getting some interns applying for some internship with us. I'm really excited to see that coming in. We've had 3 so far, so I'm really excited about that, as well as volunteers always coming in on volunteer match specifically. So again, I'm really excited about these engagements that we're getting, as well as all of the events we've been doing. I want to say the last month we hit 9 or 10 events with our team. So I was really excited to see how we are out there and about, ranging from older adults to youth, so and all in the between. So I'm really excited about that. Malia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Malia Munson. I'm the Administrative Project Coordinator with DRMAC. Apologies for my screen being off. My internet's just a little bit unstable. It's better with my video off. Latoya and I have currently been working on, for a few months now, our service map project. What we're doing is we're contacting all of the providers we have in the Getting There Guide in the Denver metro area. And we are taking their service areas and actually digitizing that in Google Maps. And that way we can have layers and kind of start to see where providers are overlapping, what neighborhoods and regions are kind of still deserted with transportation options, and then maybe take those maps to larger conversations about what we as a transportation community can be doing to solve those spaces that aren't being currently served. So that's one of the things that we have up and going right now. Arthur?
Hello, I'm Arthur. I'm the Outreach and Development Coordinator here at DRMAC. Biggest thing I want to talk about is we're halfway through the year. I know it's really fast, but because of that, our membership.
You muted yourself, I think, Arthur.
Yes.
Technical difficulties. I'll just go over it for you, Arthur. What Arthur was going to say is that jump in if you get it fixed, Arthur, is that since we are halfway through the year, all of our membership is half price. The website should be updated and allow you to make the purchases at a half price rate beginning tomorrow. And give me a thumbs up, Arthur, if I covered what you were about to say. Thank you.
All right, thanks, team. Before we dive into our panel discussions for today, coordinator from DRCOG will be giving us a quick update on the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant that was awarded to DRCOG. So Cole, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to request a screen share here if that's okay. I got a short presentation.
There you go. You should have it, Cole.
Okay, hold on. There we go. My apologies. I got to see my notes too here. All right. Can everybody see that okay? Awesome. Okay. Awesome. I'll go from the beginning here. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cole Nieder. I'm Dr. Cog's Senior Transit Planner with the Denver Regional Council of Governments. And appreciate you guys having me here today representing Dr. Cog. I'm excited to share an overview of Dr. Cog's new partnership with the Build America Bureau through the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession, or IFAC, grant program. This is a key step in accelerating our BRT, or Bus Rapid Transit, implementation goals across our region for better transit. Okay, so just as a quick agenda, I know I've got about 10 minutes here. I do want to go over just what Bus Rapid Transit design in the Denver region entails, and then explain exactly how we're leveraging our federal support through the IFAC grant, and then walk through some core BRT components and outline our anticipated work plan for this grant-funded project. So I do want to give just a brief refresher on what BRT entails, because this is an important part of this work, and it's also an important outcome for delivering a more frequent and reliable transit network in the Denver region. BRT is more than just fast or more frequent bus service. It's a system that is built around better service, larger vehicles, more accessible vehicles, better and more safe stations, and of course, pedestrian, bike, and rider safety as well. So these are just some of the core BRT design components to deliver that ideal transit network that we're looking for. BRT generally consists of dedicated lanes. So think of light rail on the existing right-of-way that we have, or existing streets, or light rail with wheels. Transit signal priority at our intersections, wider station spacing, more enhanced stations, more accessible ones with level service boarding, and then service schedules that are more frequent and also more on time and reliable. It's about reducing our headways and then keeping people moving to where they need to go efficiently as well. So our region has some ambitious goals for expanding the bus rapid transit network in our region. This is guided by Dr. Cog's 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, and then also CDOT's 10-year plan and local plans such as Denver Moves Transit as well. And so to implement a comprehensive regional BRT network, we've staged 11 different corridors to be planned and built out with BRT service. So we have 5 by 2030. Think of the major one under construction right now is the East Colfax BRT. That also includes the East Colfax extension that Dr. Cog is overseeing, and then projects who are entering the NEPA process and the alternatives analysis on Colorado and Federal Boulevard, respectively. We also have another 5 corridors that are scheduled to be completed with construction by 2040. And then the final one, 38th Avenue and Park, which is scheduled by 2050. So we know as an agency that 11 corridors, we can't apply for the same federal small starts grant for each one. So to support this work, we've secured some funding through Build America Bureau's IFAC grant program. And this is federal support that's flexible and allows us to bring in experts and technical assistance that's focused on more innovative finance and funding options for transit. It allows us to evaluate some of the legal and regulatory hurdles that we face while planning these projects, and then also allows us to plan different corridors, prepare them for an alternatives analysis or the NEPA process as a group instead of individually. And this grant overall positions us to take a real serious leap forward in identifying different viable funding and financing options for the network that we envision. So as I said before, we have 11 specific corridors that we're looking to build out by 2050. 5 of those will be the subject of this grant, and I've highlighted them in yellow here. We did this kind of on purpose. These are both, or all 5 of these are in very different stages of the planning process. For example, the East Colfax extension right now, we're about halfway through an alternatives analysis, which is the preparation to find a locally preferred alternative design for the project to enter it into the NEPA process, which is the step before construction. Spear and Alameda and Broadway have partial corridor studies that have been completed, which is like a high level visioning study for the corridor. The next step is to enter them into an alternatives analysis. And then 38th and Park, they also have a partial corridor study underway that's a little behind those as well. So the anticipated work plan for this specific grant-funded program, it includes updating our existing cost estimates of what these projects cost in both construction with capital and then operating costs as well, and then maintenance over time. The capital cost estimates you see here have even changed since a year ago. And the original cost estimates that we have for each of these corridors when we selected these 11 were, they're at least 5 years old now. So even with inflation, these have changed drastically. We are also, another big step for this project is identifying and assessing different public and private funding sources. As I said before, the FTA has a small starts and small starts funding program that we typically apply for construction funding for these programs or projects. And we know that we are not, including under this administration, going to be able to submit 11 of those small starts grants going forward. So we need alternatives to that, or we need to stage these projects over time to do that as well. And then we also need to identify different barriers that we have during the NEPA process to ensure that these projects don't become delayed, that we have universal design standards to ensure that BRT is fully accessible and reliable in our region. And just removing those barriers overall will make these projects more financially feasible and be delivered on time as well. So with this IFAC grant funding, we'll bring in these expert services through a cooperative agreement that lasts about a year. We got just under $1 million for this project, and we are currently completed scoping out that work plan and beginning work with a consultant within the next, I would say, about 3 months. So that is the overview I have for this project at the moment, and I'm more than happy to take any questions that you guys might have about the specific project and who we're involving and what we're doing going forward as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cole. This is exciting work for sure. And so I'm sure a lot of the community is going to love this support. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing. If you guys do have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll definitely get them to Cole. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say that we are really excited to dive into our panel discussion. We've set aside about 10 minutes for each panel question. And if you have any questions for our panelists, again, please just drop them into the chat. Today's panel features Ross Peterson from Ride 2, Todd Glasser from MedRide, Mark Slater from ZTrip, and Chris Diiorio from PrimeCare. So we'd like to give each of them a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, their organization, before we start with questions. So Ross, we will start with you.
Yeah, hey everybody, Ross Peterson with Ride 2. This is the first time I've talked on this call. Is my audio okay?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. By way of introduction, the prior presentation was helpful because that's doing the work that Cole just described was where my career started. I was doing National Environmental Policy Act work for light rail and BRT lines in Salt Lake City right after the Olympics, kind of the early 2000s. And a colleague of mine was called up for active duty, and he worked over in the ADA paratransit department. So I had an opportunity to go fill in for him, and I saw this huge contrast between capital project planning and working on environmental impact statements for projects that might happen 10 or 15 years from now versus going downstairs to the paratransit division where we were helping people right now. And my career changed after that point. I discovered ADA paratransit, found my passion in life, and pursued a career in human service transportation after that, mostly working in consulting and doing a lot of work in human service transportation coordination. And I know that's a big topic in today's panel, so we'll get into those topics of coordination. Eventually got deep into non-emergent medical transportation through Medicaid, and eventually decided I think the biggest place where I can make an impact is being a provider. So I left my job at MotiveCare last summer, where I was the vice president of strategy, and started Ride 2 this February. Ride 2 is a wheelchair accessible transportation service. We're a private operator, for-profit company. What distinguishes us in the space is our focus on scalability. My long-term goal is to grow Ride 2 into a national operation through a simple franchising model. And the Ride 2, what I call the Ride 2 prototype that we're operating in Centennial, is the first territory that we're opening up. I'm excited to be part of this panel, and I just want to say, looking at the names that are on this panel, I feel really grateful to be among such an esteemed group. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everybody else on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Ross. We're so excited to have you here as well. Next, Todd Glasser from MedRide. Todd, you want to give the folks a brief introduction?
Do. First and foremost, thank you for having us. Similar to Ross, just excited to be here. Transportation is challenging, as we all know. I work for MedRide. MedRide is a family-owned company. We've been in existence since 2018. Today, we do about 2,000 trips a day between ambulatory and wheelchair. We are scattered all over the state of Colorado, from the western slopes to the eastern side of the state, north and south, obviously. We have strategically placed vehicles. All of our drivers are full-time benefited staff, so they take a vehicle home with them. We are trying to do everything we can to reduce costs, increase efficiencies, and then obviously safety is a major factor. Just doing whatever we can to help take care of our seniors population for the most part. Probably, I think our stat is about 87% of our transports are seniors. The other 13%, believe it or not, fall in the education vertical, where we are transporting students to and from school with disabilities or homeless. We're transporting them to schools. We've got about 7 different contracts throughout the state. So that's been a big ploy over the last couple of years. But transportation is interesting. I've got some referral partners here. If there's trips that we can't do, we've reached out to some of the members on this team and tried to move them over to them from an efficiency standpoint or even cost effectiveness. But yeah, MedRide. We also own Metro One Ambulance, where we do ALS and BLS transports as well, so stretcher transportation, and we do about 40 trips a day via Metro One.
Thanks, Todd. I love to hear about collaborations. Just makes it easier for everyone, and it's interesting that that's the demographic you see, because that's the 2 largest demographics that we see through our INA line. So glad to hear that. Okay, next we have Mark Slater from ZTrip.
Good afternoon. Nice to see everybody on this call. I'm glad to be joined by my colleague Teague. He's also with ZTrip. He's our director, corporate director of marketing. I'm in Colorado Springs. I was invited to be on this call today to plan on being part of the panel. I think my interest in this is to see what I could do to help collaborate with some of the other resources that are available. Certainly, some of you folks are on this call. One of the questions that was asked of me in preparation for this is, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that we're facing in better coordinating private pay transportation? And so while there is an ongoing and changing demand for transportation needs, I think that by working in a collaborative environment, I think that we can work to solve many of those challenges. Would you like me to speak to some of the opportunities that I'm seeing, or do you want me to just keep this to an introduction today?
If you can just keep this space for introduction, but we'll make sure, because I really want to hear about
I think
what
so.
the thoughts you have. So we'll circle back to that. But yes, if we just make this a short introduction period.
Terrific.
Thank you, Mark. I truly agree. Collaboration. Okay, next we have Chris from PrimeCare. Chris, I don't want to destroy your last name, so please pronounce it for me.
That's all right. It's Diiorio.
Diiorio, thank you.
So, Chris Diiorio. I've owned PrimeCare for 10 years now. Started back in 2015. For the most part, I am considered a private pay provider. I work mainly directly with skilled nursing facilities and hospitals. I don't do a lot of insurance work or broker work. But, any given day, I'm doing 40, 50, 60 transports a day. I've got 15 vehicles on the road right now. And, we just got to focus on the safety and service aspect of the industry.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for being here today. I think we're ready to go to the panel discussions.
Okay.
Arthur, are you able
Can
to
you hear me
speak?
this time now? Great. Okay, so the first question for our panel discussion is, what are the opportunities and challenges in better coordinating private pay transportation with other transportation options to improve the overall accessibility and efficacy or efficiency?
Are you going to assign us to answer that, or
You
you
know
want?
what I was gonna say? I think we could either do this popcorn style, where you guys just, if you have an answer, pop in. If it works better for the flow, I can just call on each of the panelists individually. Do you
Sure.
guys have a preference?
No, I think that we can share and share alike. I think we should be okay with that.
Okay, great.
So let me just, in Colorado Springs, I think that what we're trying to accomplish is to learn from the experience up in the Denver area and see what we can do down here to enhance the services. I think the fact that we can riders can use our app and riders can call in, that certainly is, I think that's beneficial to them. It's not limited to that. You can assign designated drivers with ZTrip, and so there may be an opportunity there to team up with the hospitals, riders, a variety of needs, and plan ahead for rides. I think that some of the challenges I think that we're going to have to discuss and trying to overcome are, how do we support the elderly who may not be as comfortable working on a handheld device or a computer or even paying with a credit card. And so I think those are some things that we're going to have to discuss.
I'd love to chime in if I can. When I looked at this question, one of the things that jumped out at me is I think we need to distinguish what we mean by private pay. There's over 130 different federal funding sources that will pay for rides for seniors, people with disabilities, and people with low incomes. And I know just looking across this panel, a number of the organizations represented here receive funding from clinics or facilities that use some of those funding sources. So I think private pay is often more than just an individual paying out of pocket. I think in the context of this question, it means what role can private providers play in better coordinating? And so with that definition in mind, I think the fundamental opportunity is to increase the number of rides that can be performed. And I think there's two ways to do that. You either raise more money and promote the need of the individuals we serve among policymakers so that there's more money coming into the system, or, and it's really you reduce the cost per trip. And I think that private providers can play a role in both of those things. I mentioned my esteem from my colleagues on this panel. Everybody here has a focus on quality. Mark, we haven't met yet, but I know Teague and I know the background of ZTrip. Chris and I had a chance to talk a couple of months ago, and Todd and I have talked a number of times. And I know everybody here is focused on quality, and I think that's essential. Unfortunately, I don't think everybody in our industry is focused on quality. So I think one of the things that we need to do in the private sector is hold our peers accountable for high quality standards. And for the folks that are paying for these rides, don't accept poor quality operations. On the second part of reducing cost per trip, I can speak from fairly recent experience as a new entrant into this space. that there's nothing inexpensive about providing safe, accessible transportation. The insurance is expensive, the vehicles are expensive, the training to get it right is very time consuming and expensive. And so the opportunity we have to reduce the cost per trip isn't going to come from cutting corners. We're not going to convince legislators to spend more money on rides if it's not perceived to be a high quality service. We have to focus on quality. But where we can see a cost reduction is by increasing our productivity. The more funding sources that each of us can accept, if I can do 5 different types of rides in a day from 5 different funding sources, my ride density goes up and my cost per trip can go down. And so I think those are the 2 main areas where the private sector can play a role in increasing the number of rides that can be provided.
Thank you, Ross. Todd or Chris, do you have any input on this question?
I mean, obviously both gentlemen are correct. It's, we're at a time where every possible item is, increasing. For us, it's that a majority, 87% of our population is senior driven. We're taking patients to basically medical appointments. We do it through Medicaid. We do it through private pay. We do it through insurance via brokers. We do it through facilities. And it's just, it's old school versus new school. I'm old school, so I want that person on the phone calling. I want to increase our call centers to 24 hours a day. I want to provide that support and that security for the person on the other end. And again, senior, primary populated, to cut costs and efficiencies, technology is kind of leading that way. And I just, that's a battle that we're having internally. Do we do it landline? Do we do it, through a platform? Do we do it through portals? We have a number of ways at MedRide that you can call and schedule a ride. But, right now, I think our, out of 2,000 trips a day, 91% of those are coming over a phone line.
I think just to chime in, I'm probably in the same boat for most where, our costs are through the roof right now. And the unfortunate part is, just for simple, numbers, you're putting a $70,000 vehicle on a road now with $1,000 a month insurance premium. And, when we talk about technology, we push a lot of money towards technology, but we're kind of seeing all the costs of liability. We've got the major costs and the major liability that's going on. So finding ways to kind of curb that, I think, is the direction, we need to see, because brokers are great. They can verify, there could be talk that they've cut fraud down. But when you're providing a wheelchair company $30 a trip, and the average trip in Colorado, let's say Denver Metro, is taking over an hour, unless you have independent contractors, it just doesn't work. So I think what we're looking forward to is, shared resources, whether we can do it national, partner up. I've seen the franchise model. I've seen it work. I've seen it fail. So that's kind of the direction we're going into, is how do we provide the high quality service, but, keep our costs down, because, it's really inefficient for us to, let's say, if it costs us $400 a day to keep a vehicle on the road, we have to do 5 or 6 trips just to break even. And so our costs are going to get pushed to that patient or private pay. So that's where we kind of have to set our costs, and finding ways to lower those costs across the board are really what I try to focus on day to day.
Another big cost of that is obviously safety. And it's interesting because the state just went through a whole process. They passed a bill with Uber and Lyft possibly being removed out of the state of Colorado. Well, not being removed, but having different licenses or policies that they needed to create. MedRide has technology on board that captures the video. And we're finding out that just in the last 6 months that video process has almost doubled in price.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that it's, a lot of good stuff has been shared. One of the features that we've discovered at ZTrip that is beneficial for all parties is to understand and leverage the partnership between government entities and the private entities. Like, for example, we're in discussion with Mountain Metro. We have regional offices in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Fort Collins. Our Denver office is partnering with RTD, and our Northern Colorado office is partnering with Transfort and Greeley ECANS. And so we realize it's very difficult for a public entity to provide all the services, and it's very difficult for a private entity to satisfy all the demands. And so that when we partner with some of these public entities, we find that to be a productive approach.
I really appreciate all the comments on that. I think we're going to move on to the next question, which is, what role can private pay transportation play in addressing transportation gaps for specific populations? So populations like seniors, individuals with disabilities, or low-income individuals. Whoever wants to start off can just chime in.
I mean, the accessibility. So a majority of our, out of the 2,000 trips a day, we're probably doing anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 trips a day via Medicaid. And so we have worked with the state to strategically place vehicles, Western Slopes, Eastern Plains. We have strategically placed vehicles, and that's part of that full-time benefited employee who takes the vehicle home. But we have vehicles placed strategically everywhere throughout the state. So that's the solution. I think that I think we've done a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, I mean, just to chime in, I think what the private sector can do that the public sector and often the nonprofit sector can't do is take risks. And I watch what MedRide's doing, and it's a risk to put a vehicle out there. You don't know for certain that you're going to have ride volume, and I know some of the gaps that Dr. Mack is trying to address with rides out on the East Plains. I mean, we need to take a gamble to put a vehicle way out there and have some kind of confidence that there will be revenue to support all of the costs that we've been talking about. But I do think that risk-taking capability is unique. And I think, to Mark's point, the partnership that we can have with our public sector partners can help mitigate some of those risks and make it a little easier to close some of those gaps.
I think the fact that those who are on this call today are already in contracts and already servicing the seniors, disabilities, low-income individuals. And so I think there's a natural tendency to be empathetic towards the needs that they have. And with experience, I think we can help organize and roll out initiatives that are going to continue to service that sector.
Actually, I have kind of a question on that. Do you all try to combine your services specifically with, like, say, bus rides, like having them travel 2 buses, for example, instead of doing the whole trip yourselves to help with, like, mitigating costs, either for yourself or for the client? I'm just curious as to how that works, or if that's like something that is possible, or if that's like logistically,
We don't do that.
I'm just curious.
Go ahead. I think somebody was about to answer.
And so we don't do that because we work more of a one-on-one.
And so ZTrip uses this model in multiple locations now to arrive at a point of what we would call total inclusivity when it comes to satisfying transportation needs. Which means provide first mile, last mile. Additionally, and I think that those of us who are private providers in this can also reach destination areas that public transportation is not able to reach, and outlying areas, uncommon routes, and do the reverse to satisfy a ride originating in a non-public transit common route. I think those on this call are able to do that, and I think that just continue to look that direction and use the platforms that we have in place, and leveraging our functionality. I think that we're going to be able to, and there's going to be a learning process, as there always are in projects like this. So I think we come up with a plan, we test the plan, we roll it out, and we continue to talk on it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, what I was going to say, coming from a broker background, I think the kind of multimodal trip chaining that you're talking about happens upstream from providers, and I would even argue the incentives really aren't there for individual providers to try to make trips shorter. A lot of the trip compensation is based on a per mile rate, so the shorter the trip, the less revenue, the more problems you're going to have covering your fixed costs. So that kind of multimodal trip planning of stitching together bus routes with last mile or first mile providers probably should take place upstream from where we're operating, either at the broker level, or if it's a facility that's planning a ride, they're using their technology to identify if that's an option. But I don't see that playing out in at the provider level in a meaningful way.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other insights on this question before we move on to the next one?
I want to reiterate something I said before, which I think is the theme I want to get across, which is transportation. The problems we're trying to solve are geometric, and they're subject to laws of physics. You can't make a trip cheaper just because you want to make it cheaper. You have to address the fundamentals of the ride and either make the whole system safer so that insurance rates stop climbing at the incredible rates they've been climbing at, or you need to increase the number of rides per hour that can be performed. I mean, it's a pretty simple math problem. And so we're good at providing rides, and we have the technology to provide efficient routing. But what we need are our funding partners to remove some of the idiosyncratic differences across their programs that make it difficult for one provider to serve 3 different funding sources. An example of this would be drug and alcohol testing. There are different drug and alcohol testing rules across different funding sources, and a provider would have to apply the highest standard to their entire roster of drivers in order to perform rides across 3 different funding sources. And so coordination among funding sources to level the playing field would make it much easier for the private sector then to provide rides across all those funding sources and effectively coordinate at the bottom of the funnel.
I really appreciate that insight. All right, we'll go to the next question, which might have a bit to talk about. The comment you just made might actually apply a bit here too. But how can coordination efforts ensure equitable access to all transportation options for all residents, regardless of their ability to pay? And Ross, like I said, I think your comment there is very helpful of coordinating the funding sources. But does anyone else also have some thoughts on this?
If I could speak to that, what I'm learning in other opportunities that we're looking at is that we can partner with, when any of us actually partner with a public entity and come in early and become part of the planning, then it really helps in the execution in uh, helping identify what the needs are going to be well in advance, and so that we can build a strategy to satisfy those needs. We like to be able to say we hit everybody all the time, regardless of their ability to pay. But sometimes it's a growing effort. Sometimes you have to grow into it. And so I think by partnering with organizations in advance, which we are doing on an ongoing basis, that helps our efforts in becoming partners with, not simply service providers for. And so I think this type of dialogue, with this type of discussion, I think is really helpful to learn from one another and support a larger effort to to meet those needs.
I agree with you on that, Mark, because a lot of times when you get into working with contracts that are larger, whether it's broker or state, they basically come out with, we need 10,000 trips provided across. And, we all know, let's say each van can accommodate 6, 7 trips a day, but it can't be at the same time. So a lot of times when we look at RFPs or contracts, when you get into those who aren't providing the transports that are making the decision, then to broker out or whatever it may be, it comes, it comes almost impossible to facilitate. And I think the state, with their new RFP going out for, Medicaid, of saying, okay, we're going to tack an additional $700,000 for the whole state to be managed. Simple math tells you that's almost impossible.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to, Chris, also supports the notion that the coordination in these kinds of things reduce costs, allowing funding and subsidy programs to work their magic, and those can take time. And so I think with coordination, it allows the RFPs to push out and get responded to and get providers in place. It's not reasonable to think that one person can fix it all, but it is reasonable that by collaborating, that a team can certainly provide a greater response than a single entity. So I think planning ahead is key, just like we're doing here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in. I think coordination in and of itself shouldn't be the goal. I think coordination is a tool in the toolbox, and I think there's other words that start with C that are also helpful. Communication, for example, culture, setting up a culture where folks feel safe sharing this kind of information. Another C word is competition. There's a couple of us here. I know Todd's a basketball coach. I've got kids that play sports, and I know that competition makes them all better. And I think that we're better when we're competing. And so we need to be thinking about, I would say, having spent a lot of my career writing human service transportation coordination plans, I think that word is too vague to be helpful. And we should boil it down and get more specific. What Mark just talked about, of getting people together before an RFP is released to communicate, I think that is far more helpful than sort of vague references to coordination. I think we should be really specific about the things that we're doing. And Mark, that was a fabulous example. I really appreciate that. I guess the point is, coordination in and of itself shouldn't be the objective. The objective should be much more focused on how do we do more rides for the folks that need them, and what are the tools in our toolbox for getting more rides out there, whether it's, reducing costs or increasing funding, setting high standards. I think that's really what we should be focused on.
Russ, I'd like to add something to your comment because that's a really good point and something I hadn't thought of. But when you think of the coordination piece as it applies to providers like or services, nonprofit orgs like Dr. Mac or VIA's information and assistance line or Dr. Cog's information and assistance line, right? We're not going to be involved in that higher level RFP process, but we are getting the phone calls for the folks in need. So then I think then that's where it would look more like a collaboration, right? We would need to work more closely with the providers to say, okay, can you take, like Arthur was saying, can you take this last mile if eventually, if we get to that point in the perfect world, right? So I would just ask that as providers are think, which is a great plan. I'm so happy to hear that you guys are having these discussions, but that you also think about the organizations that are directing folks to your services as well, so we can make sure that we have the information we need to be able to help as many people get to where they need to go as possible, if that makes sense.
Did you have anything further on that question? Anything else you wanted to speak to?
I didn't.
No, I think I really enjoyed the different
it's good
perspectives on that
discussion.
one. Yeah, I really like that.
Arthur, I'm sorry. This is Cole. I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. I know you guys are moderating, but I kind of wanted to ask a follow-up to that.
Sure, yeah, please.
Awesome. On the topic of coordinating or coordinated transit planning as well, what do you guys look for in terms of goals set within those plans, especially from a regional level? So, and my question has an agenda. We're updating our plan this year as well. And so I kind of want to know what you guys, especially from the private sector, are looking for and how those plans are actually useful to be implemented over a 5-year time span.
That's a great question. Yeah, if anyone wants to chime in on that one.
Cole, I'll start. I've got a lot of experience writing those plans, so you definitely have thoughts about this. Please involve us. I think that would be the first point. To Mark's point, that the sooner you get us involved, the more we can anticipate what the needs are. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and other providers in the community. And I'll speak for myself. I would love to be involved, and I'm sure my colleagues on this panel would appreciate the opportunity as well. Second, in terms of concrete metrics, I think it's more than just metrics. I think you need benchmarking. The metrics that matter most to me are total average cost per trip and at least 1 or 2 measures of customer satisfaction. I think on-time performance and CSAT or net promoter scores or just general customer satisfaction scores, maybe complaints, are one way to measure that. But it's not just looking at what those are as a point in time. I think it's really important, especially in a coordinated plan, to set a benchmark and say, all right, it's 2025. What's the average cost per trip today? How many trips are we able to fund across all of the different funding sources? And then you can look at that 2 years down the road and say, all right, well, did we put more money into the system? How did inflation affect our ability to provide rides? And after a 2 or 3 year period, are we accomplishing more than we were accomplishing when we started? Has coordination actually resulted in more trips being served? Has quality improved? And so if you're not setting some kind of basic benchmarks, and I wouldn't get overly complicated, I think cost per trip and customer satisfaction are your kind of number 1 and number 2 objectives. If you're not benchmarking, then I don't think you can measure progress. And if you can't measure progress, frankly, I think it's kind of a wasted planning effort.
Yeah, to speak to your question, Cole, my experience has taught there's 3 kinds of projects: the one you think you're going to do, the one you do, and the one you wish you would have done. And so when we've probably already always all have experienced that. But and so knowing that the coordination part early on brings out ideas. It fosters thought and consideration. It helps us to identify the snakes in the grass and all those kinds of things. And so and then if we identify the end result, which has already been spoken to, and that is to get these good folks to where they want to be when they want to be there. So early on, coming up with a kind of a master plan, and then do a beta, and then reevaluation, and then a launch. I think it helps to identify early on through experience what resources, what technology, what tools and measurements, what metrics we are currently using to track some of our performance data. I think that's going to be beneficial in an effort like this.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're gonna move on to the next question now.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Cole, for asking that question. That was a good question.
The next question is, what are the potential benefits of increased coordination for riders? Examples can include seamless transfers, single point of contact, or reduced waiting times.
I think if you dive into that, I mean, your number one thing of working together in coordination could lower costs. And that's what we're, all looking to do as we've done this business and seen costs grow exponentially over the past few years. How do we make this provide the same level of service that we're providing, but manage the costs? And, obviously we don't want to push that onto the patient, the customer, but how can we coordinate together? And, even if you can lower your costs, $5 per trip, a lot of people don't think, yeah, $5 doesn't really mean a lot, when you're billing millions of dollars, but it's the $5 multiplied out a million times. So, I try to, whether that's, I think a big thing we deal with is the communication. How do we streamline this business? Our on time scenes, could go through the roof. That's a cost to us, that
Am I the only one that lost
Iris,
Chris?
no, I think we have a technical situation. Hopefully he'll pop back on.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, just got kicked out. But yeah, just the communication and the coordination to small costs can go a long way for what we do. And whether it's, $5 here and there, I kind of work with my staff and saying, if you go in early, that 15 minutes makes that next patient be on time. You're getting paid anyway. So it's really the small things that can make a difference. And as we work across the board through, whether it's brokers, the states, grants, whatever it may be, and just the communication and the sharing of those costs can really help, us absorb the high insurance costs, the vehicle costs and stuff like that. So it can kind of domino throughout the industry of how we can help each other.
There is a less obvious, and thanks, Chris, there is a less obvious benefit that it's enjoyed through effective coordination, and that is that this kind of coordination can provide trips that cannot otherwise be done without coordination. And so they don't just happen by themselves. You have to be able to plan those out and have a stopgap and have a backup contingency plan. And so coordination is going to help accomplish that.
I have a question for my fellow panel members. Chris, you were talking about, saving $5 per ride, looking for those savings. I wonder if there's areas where we could collaborate. One area, for example, is driver training. I don't know if there's any interest at all in sharing resources in that space, but I would certainly be willing to collaborate on driver training, sharing resources at a minimum. But if you've got a a pass certified trainer available that I could rent, I would rent them almost immediately. Just putting it out there.
And that's actually when you say certified, there really is no standard,
Right.
national standard in this industry. And I know a few people on this call have worked with NEMTEC, and Melissa Janikowski in Denver is a huge resource. And that's really what it is, the shared resources, because, I know I'm on the same contract with brokers, like I do them here and there. And when they come back to me and say, hey, can you lower your costs by 50% because I have another provider willing to do it for half and try to make money, and they go out of business, it gets frustrating when, I wish our providers knew. It's like, hey, don't sell yourself short, provide a higher level of service, and, do it, because it's only going to steamroll the industry into saying who is the least cost provider. And when I hear that, that means that they don't really care about the patient experience or the safety of a patient. They just want to get it done as cheap as possible. So I think shared resources can be coming, but until they really define a standard of what a trainer is in this industry, it's the simple of following, what you learn from each other.
Yeah, and Dr. Mack, I think, could play a role in that. I think we don't have to wait for a national standard to emerge, for a local standard to emerge. But I think there's reluctance among providers to define the standard because of liability reasons. There needs to be an industry standard, but there's no reason why there couldn't be a Colorado industry standard, right?
Mhm.
Ross, I know you've spoke of it a few times, but putting together a group of reputable organizations throughout the state of Colorado, and I'll use the word fraternity, but whether it's we meet once a quarter or share ideas, share thoughts, talk about trainers, talk about how we could support one. There's so much transportation that there's plenty of transports for everyone. But how can we do it better? How can we do it more cost effective? And how can we do it more safely?
I agree with that.
So Ross, are you leading that?
I'm dispatching currently.
Dr. Mack, we can talk about it offline, but Ross and I have talked about it a little bit, but putting together, a group of individuals, owners, operators, directors, whatever their titles are, but and putting us all in the room, a couple times every quarter and seeing how we can support, whether it's clients or each other or whatever that need is. I don't think there's any agency out there that provides that.
Yeah, no, sorry, Todd, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it seems like that would fall under a function of an RCC. So it would technically probably fall under a Dr. Mac umbrella. So we would be happy to collaborate that. We could talk more after this. Certainly, you let me know your thoughts or what you guys are thinking, but we'd be happy to host some sort of meeting like that. And I just learned something. I did not know there wasn't a state standard. So that's interesting.
There is not a state standard. I did
not know that.
Roger, just on the Medicaid side?
Well, Medicaid has standards, but there isn't a uniform standard that all funding sources point to. The PASS is often regarded as a national standard, but I think there's differences of opinion about whether or not it's sufficient. I personally hired an additional person to come out and provide training on top of the PASS training standard because I don't think it goes deep enough. So those are my thoughts about that.
Does anyone else have any more thoughts on that before we move on to the next question?
I think that was it.
Okay, I think we probably can skip this next question because I feel like we've already kind of discussed it. And unless someone has more to add to it and for the sake of time. Or is that question? Yeah, question 5. I think we already spoke to this one, but if either any of you have anything to add to this. Okay. So I want to just give a quick overview of, well, first I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. Your insight into this subject was incredibly valuable. But next, I want to share some information about our upcoming tech training opportunities through Dr. Mack and Mark. I think this speaks to what you said about helping this, maybe, I don't want to generalize, but more often than not, the older adults be more comfortable with using the apps and the technology. We currently have a tech training that's hosted once a month that does exactly that. We also go over some other things like security and how to navigate your smartphone, how to recognize scams and more. But the ultimate goal is that we were getting a lot of folks in our trainings who weren't comfortable using the apps that are more often than not used when scheduling transportation options. So I want to go over that. We can put if you're interested, you can reach out to us at info@drmac-co.org or by calling us at 303-243-3113. And I'm going to ask someone on the team to please put that info. Thank you, Malia. You're so good. And then I also want to mention that we are doing a series of Spanish travel trainings in collaboration with the Arc of Aurora coming up in July. So you can use the same email or phone number if you'd like to get some more information on that. I have some folks that would benefit from those classes. And next, I'm going to turn it back over to Arthur.
Thank you very much. So for our June member spotlight, we are going to highlight 2 of our amazing Dr. Mac members, TSAC and MedRide, in a quick 2 to 3 minute spotlight. Andrea, would you like to tell us a little bit about TSAC's work?
You're muted, Andrea.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. Yes, and actually we've got 2 projects that we're trying to pull off. One of them, if Ross hasn't left yet, Ross and Todd, we're attempting to find a way to get shut-in seniors to rec or senior facilities for socialization. And that we've got all of the facilities on board, and now we just have to figure out the transportation part, because right now we don't have any money for that. And we're trying to figure out how to do this. I'm going to be looking for a grant shortly and possibly some ride providers. And the other project we're doing is 2 workshops. They're the same, one in Aurora and one in Englewood on not Accessoride. Now I've lost the word. But the ride providing part of RTD for people who don't drive, access on demand, to explain to folks who need that kind of service how to go about doing it with RTD. And then also what Colleen just explained, how the smart apps work on the phone and how to find a ride that way. So I'm kind of excited about these 2 projects, and I'm hoping at least one of them comes through. Well, I'm not hoping. I know that the smartphone part will work, and those are happening in October. It's the getting shut-ins to facilities that's going to take a lot more work. But I'm excited about either of those happening. Thank you.
Thank you. I
That's
really
it for
appreciate
me.
that. Yeah, And Todd, would you like to tell us a little bit about MedRide and if there's anything on top of everything you've already talked about today?
I think the fact that we are a family-owned business, we operate 7 days a week throughout the entire state, as mentioned. I think we have about 317 vehicles strategically scattered throughout the state. All of our drivers, again, are full-time benefited employees. Our call center and our scheduling team is open from Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. We're also open on Saturdays and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can book a ride 24 hours a day. You just have to do it during that time frame. Every one of our employees is in uniform. They're typically driving a vehicle about 3.5 years or newer, just primarily because once they hit a certain plateau of miles, we take that vehicle and we either auction it off, or we've now kind of created our own junkyard where we're pulling it in and putting pieces on other vehicles. We pull them off, and we have our own mechanic shop now. We also have the other division I mentioned a little bit about called Metro One Ambulance. So we're a stretcher company where we provide basic life support and advanced life support. We've got a license to cover the entire state with our Metro One division. In fact, just yesterday we took someone from Colorado to North Dakota, believe it or not. They tried the air route. It was way. You guys have heard all the stories lately with air. So they ended up going in ambulance, and we drove an ambulance all the way up to Bismarck, North Dakota. And we do the same thing with MedRide. As long as the participate is originating in the state of Colorado, we can transport them anywhere. So we do a lot of we're taking people to Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. We'll do that as well.
That's amazing.
What else? Yeah, we provide door-to-door service. So we're not just dropping off at the curb. We're going to actually walk the participant up to the reception area and do a kind of a warm handoff, and then vice versa coming back. We provide Medicaid, Medicare, private pay, facility pay, all gamuts.
Amazing. That's an amazing story, driving that far. That's awesome. But yeah, thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we always love acknowledging all the amazing individuals and organizations that are part of DRMAC. As a reminder from earlier, we're halfway through the year, so we're offering a 50% off membership for the remainder of 2025. You can check our website for more details. You can also email me about it if you want. But otherwise, thank you so much. We'll pass it on to Colleen.
Thank you, Arthur. And I want to say thank you again to our panelists. This has been a great discussion. But now we're getting close to the end of our meeting. So I kind of just open it up for anyone that has community updates, or let's collaborate, share any upcoming meetings or promotions that would benefit the group. Please feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or simply share in the chat. Or if there's anything that you would just like to email to us and we can share it out. The email to, well, how about, can one of you guys please put the marketing email in the chat for me, please? You can do that as well. So the floor is yours. It's an open space. Sarah, I think you put something in the chat about your org hosting some app trainings. Do you wanna explain that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I know that we host like Access on Demand, Access-a-Ride, different workshops. We host like a Mobility 101 training. We typically wait for people to reach out to us to have trainings, just because sometimes we have them at random places. But yeah, Mobility for All, Boulder County, we do support, like, we have an information and assistance line in case anybody's new to us. We help people, apply for Access-a-Ride who are in Boulder County. I go with them to Access-a-Ride application or interview things. And then we also do teach, like, I think the cap is like 15, or not the cap, sorry. It's like 5 people to like 15 kind of is like the place, or the when we do like workshops, we do like 5 to 15 people. And then we do them for like organizations and stuff. So if anybody ever needs that, you can reach out to us. I don't know if that's helpful, but there you go.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Would you like to put your email address in the chat, or
Yeah,
is that okay? Thank
I'll put
you.
it in there. Yeah, it's the Mobility for All email is the best way to get a hold of us. So I'll put that in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Anyone else? Hey, I'm trying to make sure I don't see any raised hands before I move on. Okay. Well, then that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Thank you all for attending and for your engagement. We're excited to see you at next month's meeting scheduled for July 8th, 1:30 to 3 p.m. via Zoom. You can find registration links for all of the Dr. Mac 2025 meetings on our website. Thanks again, and we hope to see you all next month. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course.